Hello, fellow Greenspringers. It is Thursday. It is October 25th, and it is cold outside, so stay in for the next hour and watch Channel 6 here. We've got on Village in Motion this morning two of our resident council members who are with the Finance Committee, and we're going to be talking about finances and, might learn something about how we deal with finances here at Greenspring. But welcome. We're glad to have with us this morning Ken Kauke, who is our liaison to the Finance Committee from the Resident Council, and Herman Anschuetz, who is their secretary for the Resident Council Finance Committee. And we're glad to have both of you guys with us.
Thank you, Clint. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, I have to put my disclaimer out there, in regards to it. I am a member of the Finance Committee, and but you guys are to treat me as if I know nothing, which you typically do, about finance.
That's very easy, Clint.
Very easy for me to do. What is the purpose of having a Finance Committee as a part of Resident Council?
Well, the Finance Committee exists, as I understand it, to inform the residents of financial matters, to represent the residents, that is to say, to bring resident concerns, issues, questions to the Finance Committee and to the Council, and also perhaps, and maybe more importantly, to have an independent opinion as a committee as to the soundness, the health of the operation. Mm-hmm. And the committee, of course, also has an obligation to keep itself operating, so it has looks towards training or preparing people to take over as future leaders of the committee, mm-hmm. and that pretty much sums it up.
Okay, Herman, you are the secretary.
Right.
And I have to say, folks, if you ever want a superb secretary on anything, mm-hmm. Herman's your man. He is thorough. He's clear, and it is really nice to get your minutes of the meetings. And you've been on the Finance Committee for how long?
A little over a year.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
When you sit there and listen to the discussions that go on, what are you focusing on?
Well, basically what the people are saying, what the folks are saying, and trying to encapsulate that into just a few words, which I have not been too successful
at. I think you've been very successful.
But it's basically an attempt to put into clear language for the community. Anyone that's interested, the minutes are always up in the library. They can go in there, read through what we've talked about, and perhaps get a little better understanding of what the committee's doing.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And you put the minutes in the library how often?
Each month. Typically, the previous month's minutes will appear in the library by the 15th, the middle of the following month.
Okay, all right. And they're in the folders, right?
Yes, and the folders in the back edge of the library near the big dictionary.
Okay, all right. Very good. Ken, one of your responsibilities as a liaison is to bring information from the council to the Finance Committee and to take information from finance to the council, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
What do you see happening with that information?
Well, there isn't a lot of information. Given the system we have now for providing information to residents, there's not a lot in the last year that I could bring to the committee from the council. The afternoon that we have a finance meeting on the third Monday at 10 o'clock in the morning.
For 2 hours.
For 2 hours. At 1 o'clock, there's the coffee with the administrative team, and that is very informative. So right. It's kind of hard to top that. The other thing is that we get the financials. The monthly financials are not finished until about the middle of the month. Right. And sometimes we don't get them until almost the day of our meeting, which means the first time I have to report on the latest data is the General Council meeting, which is the fourth Monday of the month. And that is pretty much where I report on the financial stuff. Okay. But other than that, what's going on in the council is pretty much it's been pretty much already revealed to most to the community, to those people who participate in the meetings anyway.
Right. Well, one of the other ways that you spread the information, disseminate the information about the financial status of the community is in the Villager, right?
Yeah, we do. The chair prepares quarterly so-called highlights. We've done that, I guess, for 3 years now. The committee found a couple of years ago, Ron Bowes in particular led this initiative, that people we put out an elaborate 4-page, 3 sides report on finances, but watching people in the cubby areas, the reports were going straight into the recycle bin. Mm-hmm. So it was decided to come up with a short, brief highlights, which we now report quarterly. It shows the occupancy rate, which is the key metric. Right. It shows operating income, operating expense, and operating income, which are the key metrics that Erickson uses in judging how an operation is being run. And it shows total assets, total liabilities. So hopefully assets are more than liabilities. Right. And twice a year we show the balance in the investment, in the Tier 3 investment account.
Right. I'm going to stop you. What's a Tier 3?
Well, financial, Erickson has 3 accounts set up for investing funds of the communities. Tier 1 is the really short-term stuff. Tier 2 is a little bit longer, and Tier 3 is in equities and bonds invested by Vanguard. And there are, I believe, 7 mature communities, that is to say, communities where the community has bought out the property from the developer, such as Green Spring. And these 7 communities invest their extra funds in a Tier 3 account at Vanguard.
Okay. And Vanguard is?
Well, Vanguard, most people realize, Vanguard is the largest, if not the second. I forget whether Fidelity is larger today.
Yeah,
I think Vanguard is the largest mutual fund or money manager, period, but certainly mutual fund manager in the country. So they manage mutual funds and funds for pensions, all kinds of not-for-profit organizations.
Okay. And anybody can buy in with them, invest with them?
Oh, yes. As an individual, you can invest with them through their mutual funds.
Right.
But Vanguard was early on with so-called passive or index investing. So this is not something the Finance Committee
Right.
deals with,
Right.
but that's one reason. And I think maybe 40, I forget whether it's 40% or 60% of our funds are passively invested.
Okay.
But that's not something, the National Senior Campus Board has an investment committee on which our resident director happens to sit.
Roy does.
Yes, which is responsible for running this Vanguard account.
Okay.
And since Roy, as resident director, does sit on the Finance Committee, we are able to go to him when we have questions in this area.
Right. We mentioned the fact that Roy is on the committee. Roy O'Connor is on the committee.
Well, he's not on the committee. He's kind of a perpetual guest.
Right. Yeah. Okay. He's always in attendance.
He doesn't have a vote.
Exactly.
Well, at least a legal vote.
Right. Exactly. Herman, who all is on the council? I think people need to know the members of the council.
We have Estelle Malor, who hasn't been attending the past couple meetings, and then Don Coase, who also apparently is having some difficulty getting to the meetings. And then we have yourself. Mm-hmm. Ken is liaison, and myself. Right now, there are only what?
And Rachel is
chairman. There are only 4 of us actually on the committee in attendance, which raises the question for the coming year for folks that might be interested and feel that they have some background experience in finance to sit in or to
join us,
put up their names for consideration to join the committee.
The committee has always been held to 7 seats because that's how big the room is. It's totally controlled by space. It's kind of like rabbits in regards to it. But there's always only been the possibility of having 7 members on the Finance Committee. But if people are interested, they need to put their name in as volunteering to be on the Finance Committee if they have knowledge, right? Have some background.
Well, I think that's an important consideration with finance. It's a little different than dining. We all have experience in dining because every day, we're taking part in feeding nourishing our bodies. But finance is something that, particularly for an organization like this, that most people would not be familiar with, or even understand the terms, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I always find that interesting about not understanding the terms, and I think Rachel has been very good this year about making sure that people understand the terms. And one of the things came up the other day, and Ken, you weren't at the resident council meeting this past week, but it's in regards to NOI.
Yeah, well, I wrote that report, and maybe I was a little bit too casual with the NOI, knowing Betty would read it. But Betty had been at the meeting; she'd sat in as a guest at our finance committee meeting. Betty being the vice president of the council, resident council. So maybe that was unfair. That was a little bit of a trap.
So why don't you tell everybody what NOI is?
Well, NOI is net operating income. As I mentioned before, in this quarterly highlights, which the next one will appear, I guess, we have October. We just got October's and November's, so it'll be in the next Villager. We show net operating income and net operating expense. Right. And as I tried to explain 2 council meetings ago, the difference is net operating income. And if you take a percentage of that divided by net operating income, you get a margin, and that's how Erickson judges how well we're doing.
Right.
So it's a little bit complicated, but it's easier if one's focusing on the numbers.
Yes.
One of the things we've tried to do with that highlights is list the members of the committee, so that if it creates questions, people will know who to go to with their questions. But at one point, the Villager decided that was too much. Was too much to have the names in every quarter. Right. So right now, I think we're putting them in again, except maybe now when the committee's so kind of decimated by illness and the unfortunate, shocking death of Hugh McManaman a couple of weeks ago. So,
right.
But it's net operating income is the key number.
Right.
Operating meaning the numbers that Ty is director of dining and Lynn is director of general services control. It's the income and expenses that they can control. It doesn't include things like depreciation as an expense, or financial gains in the stock market, or interest paid, things like that. So it's a measure of how the departments are being operated.
Okay. Which truly means the fact of how much money we're making.
Yeah, we're a not-for-profit organization. Right. That doesn't mean that we aim to make losses.
Right.
We run it on a profit basis. The monthly statements we get are detailed just like a for-profit business.
Right.
We don't call it profit. We call it net
right.
At the end. We call it net equity instead of surplus or net worth. But it's.
And what I think is really nice as being a member of the committee is we get the same thing that the execs get, the administrators get. Mm-hmm. We get the same report, and it's actually identified as the executive summary.
Don't tell corporate that. I'm not sure we're supposed to get that.
Oh, okay. But it's an executive summary of performance, and it lists from all the financials in regards to it. And it's really a nice printout, and Cody, who is our finance director here at Green Spring, goes over that entire report with us once a month at the monthly meeting in regards to it. With that, can you and Herman, or you and Rachel meet with Cody on a regular basis?
Rachel is the chair, and myself as the liaison have a so-called agenda meeting with the finance director about a week or 10 days before the actual finance meeting, going over what the chair thinks should be on the agenda, and seeing what the finance director feels is important, what issues are of concern to him, and then we kind of work around that. So yes, we do meet with them on a regular basis.
Okay. Because one of the things I've always found fascinating is the number of days of cash on hand that we have, and how much larger how much greater that is than what's required. In regards to it.
Well, our T3 investment account is the largest of all the Erickson communities. In a recent month, or maybe even the last public report we made, I think even after drawing down $20 million this year to pay for Dogwood Commons, I think we still showed a balance of something like $160 million in that account. And that is by and far the largest of all the communities.
Yep.
And that number goes into the count of days cash on hand, because that's the way the bond rating agencies think it should be calculated.
Right.
Although theoretically, you might say it isn't really cash if it's in stocks and bonds.
Yeah, because it's not truly something where you can go in and get dollar bills.
It's pretty liquid, but it's not as liquid as treasury bills or a bank deposit. Yeah.
So it has to be sold.
Yeah, it has to be sold, and you get a check, which is clearinghouse check.
Right, in regards to it. So it is kind of deceiving in regards when you look at the amount.
Yeah. The key thing, Clint, is the occupancy rate. I think some of the other communities, like Charlestown, has been in existence, maybe, I don't know, what is it, some 83, so
25 years.
17 years before us.
Right, yeah.
And Riderwood about the same time, Oakcrest about the same time, but we're much like, we've had probably the highest occupancy rate of any of the communities on a consistent basis, up above 98% most of the time. So it's that's where the cash comes. We're highly leveraged.
Yeah.
Because of the labor expense is so large that every dollar of those last few residents coming in goes to the so-called bottom line.
Right. Yeah. In fact, what percentage is it of our overall expenses is for labor? Do you remember?
Well, it probably runs in the neighborhood of 70%, depending on how you count benefits. And also, we have our own employees, and we also have contract labor.
Right.
So, in the total picture, labor, is pretty big expense. It's 70 or 80%, maybe approaching 80, and it's not flexible. Whether we have 1,900 residents or 1,700 residents, we still have to have a high employee count.
Right. And right now I just learned this past week, we actually have 1,100 employees, but only 900 plus of them are actually full-time equivalents, and I don't think people always see the difference there.
Right. Well, that makes a difference because the non-full-time don't get all the benefits, which raises the expense. Right.
Yeah, in regards to that. Herman, when you came onto the committee, your background was in finance?
No. No. Well, a little bit. Any manager in any private business at reasonable levels is interested in the expense and the income in his organization. As a matter of fact, at CNP, for a period of time, I was a superintendent of buildings, motor vehicles, and supplies. So I did have budget concerns regarding maintenance of property, that kind of thing. And I guess the thing that struck me as I came onto the committee was, that was a pretty narrow focus.
Yeah.
We had a couple hundred buildings in the state of Maryland, but,
right.
Every one was kind of like the next one.
Yeah.
You come here, you have dining concerns, you got medical medical services that you want to provide to your residents. It's just a whole raft of additional issues. That the report that we get from the finance director struck me in the beginning as how open they are in letting us know what's going on in this community. Like, there's nothing behind the scenes that we're not privy to.
Right.
So I guess my background was not finance, but it is certainly enlightening and to see what's involved here.
It really is, and I think if more residents really pay attention to the financial report, the bit more you understand all that's involved in it, and it begins to make sense about why we have our monthly fees and why each year we have the increase in our fees type situation. Speaking of that, I know that the committee does not set the fees, monthly fees. Those fees come out of where?
Well, the budget, that comes from the board ultimately. It's an effort by the local management along with the board of directors They do long-term planning actually. So there's some kind of planning and forecasting and planning going on all the time. We're not privy to all of these numbers.
Right.
But when push comes to shove, starting I guess in about July or August of each year, they start preparing budgets for the following year, and then eventually the fee increase. It'll probably be an increase because it reflects inflation, an increase in costs. Gets generated out of this budget forecast. So everything is budgeted. Revenues are budgeted, expenses are budgeted, and ultimately the fee is budgeted to keep it all in balance.
Right. And so that then comes out of that budget that then the board makes a decision on to pass it on to the residents.
Right, and the fee increases vary from community to community as far as we can tell. I mean, they don't tell us, but people have contacts, friends, relatives in other communities.
Right.
So we know that each community has its own calculations and its own fee consideration. And then, the three members of the board, the so-called CRC, or Community Relations Council, I guess it is, that we now have, which is Jackson Bain, Elaine Erstadt, and Roy O'Connor, a resident director. They will announce or be part of the announcement of the fee increase in, I guess it's December?
December.
Yeah, first week of December.
Right.
This year. So we'll have I guess we call it a forum.
Right. a town hall.
A town hall. It'll be a town hall where this is formally announced.
Right.
Actually, I think the specific announcement comes from the executive director's office, from Chandra's over her signature.
Yeah.
But then the board comes to kind of endorse it.
And historically around here, we've usually had right around 3%.
Yeah, last couple of years it's been about 3%.
But it doesn't mean that
Doesn't mean it can't be 2.5 or 3.5
or 5
or 5. I don't know. It's costs are all over the place. That's one of the things we really haven't had time to explore on the finance committee. But if you think about it, we're exposed to all kinds of markets. The labor market in this area, which is very tight, both for professionals for this industry and for just hourlies. It's a very tight labor market. And then you have the turkey market is tight. Right. Because of the hurricane, or something's going on with chickens or pig. Maybe the tariffs will affect, general services and capital expenditures. Who knows? All these things are going on.
Yeah, and so that all has an effect on how the fees that we need to pay in order to stay above water, in regards to it. Because I'm always amazed at how many people we lose because they can make more money elsewhere than they do here.
Yeah, my understanding is Erickson, as in general, doesn't like to be a salary leader.
Right.
So they try to pay the middle of the market, where the market is most active. So they don't like to pay up, because when you're working in a tight market, if you raise rates, all you do is increase your costs without creating any additional supply. So that's our situation.
But with all of this and all the information that the committee gets, it's nice to have a means of being able to disseminate that information, and know that residents are involved in what goes on in regards to it. For the future, any thoughts about what's going to happen with the committee?
No, Rachel and I had discussed it with Ron Taylor before we knew he was leaving, and we discussed it with Cody, and I've had discussions with Roy. But beyond that, we really haven't nailed anything down. As you know, in November, the council will be circulating the forms by which people can apply, and then we'll see what happens. My term is up. Right. After 4 years, I couldn't run for the council. So we'll see what happens. But
you can still serve on the committee.
I could serve on the committee. Yes, I could.
I hope you do.
Thank you.
Amen.
Right. But I mean, from my standpoint, it's meaningful to have people who have the knowledge base, who have the experience, to have some of those people on the council.
Right. There was a time when we had members of the committee who were capable, not only capable, but willing to write articles for the Villager, which takes some doing to be able to generate an article, as you well know. So that hasn't necessarily been the case in recent years. So yeah, we need people hopefully who understand finance but are willing to not necessarily, you don't have to be an expert, but willing to look at the numbers and think about the numbers and work at it.
Very good. Well, Herman, any last words?
No, the only addition I would have is that everyone, if they had the knowledge that we had, would feel very comfortable about Green Springs' financial situation. I was impressed when I joined the committee to see how solid it is.
Yeah. I would totally agree. And I thank both of you for being with us this morning and sharing your knowledge with everybody that's watching today and will be watching. And pass it on.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you very much.